Hi everyone. So today I'm going to talk a bit about genealogy. So genealogy is my passion, and previously I've researched my own family tree because my husband's family and my name is actually quite unusual. So we have the only family in Great Britain, so it was just to try and find out where the name came from and what it was all about. So here's my top tips in researching your own family tree. So start with what you know. So any information that you already have, you can start to build your own family tree. So your names of your parents, the names of your siblings, perhaps your parents' brothers and sisters, and perhaps your grandparents. That's always a good place to start. Look at any family info that you already have. So those boxes that you've got stashed in the back of the cupboard, that perhaps that you were given, and any photographic evidence, having a look at that and seeing what clues you can get from that. What do you want to find out? So, do you want to find out more about your grandparents and their time in the war? Do you want to find out a little bit more about, what jobs they did? Having a bit of a focus is often helpful when you're trying to do your family tree, because sometimes there's so much information out there, it's easier to focus on a little bit so that you can then branch out to other things. Talk to your family. So you might have older cousins, parents, anything like that, and they're often a very good source of information, and they might have family stories that that were passed down to them about their grandparents, about things that happened to the family in the past, and that's often a very rich source of information to get you started. Do you have a family member that might want to do it with you? So maybe a cousin who obviously you share common grandparents, you might share common stories, and that can also help as well when you perhaps want to order birth, marriages and death certificates. That can often become quite pricey if you go down that route. Keep records of where your information comes from. Often the problem when you're looking at your family tree is you look at a person who has a very similar name or perhaps the same name as your grandparents, but actually, is that the right person? And to keep track of where your information came from is very helpful. So if it's from a family story, you can note that down. But when you're looking at the official records, you might find a slight change in surname, first name and things like that, which makes it harder when you're looking at the actual records. Remember to fact check as best you can. Just because a person has the same name as your grandparents or the same area doesn't mean it's actually the right place. So you can do that in a number of things. Obviously, by checking with family, you can do that. You can order the birth, marriages and death certificates for that person to double check. But as I say, that can become quite costly when you do it that way. Unusual names are often easier to research than common ones. So a John Smith versus another name is going to be a lot harder to trace because there's often thousands of people with that name, whereas a more uncommon surname or an unusual surname is often easier to research. Transcription errors exist. So remember that if you are using any online ancestry, family tree kind of things, these are often transcribed by people. So they're working from handwritten records of things, so maybe from a church register or from a census record that were often handwritten. So sometimes the spelling of your ancestor might be slightly different, and it doesn't mean that it's wrong, it just means that the person has misunderstood kind of what was written. And also the old census records used to work on the spoken word. So you could say that your name was, Petunia, and then they might put it down as Petula. And that's what happens because they're based on what they said to them at that time, which is not always accurate. But often some of these websites allow you to highlight transcription errors and say that actually you think it might have been this. there's free resources available. So yes, I'm saying there's a cost to some of it, but there is also free access that you can get. So Find My Past is available through Sunderland Library. So you can go and use the computers in the library when we're not in lockdown, and use the computers and use the Find My Past search engine, which is often very good, and it's got all of the census, birth certificates, deaths, things like that. Just remember though that you can't search someone who is still alive. Okay, obviously for, well, now data protection, and obviously validity of records, only people who have, you know, passed might be there. There is some birth records, but mostly it is for people who are passed. Many websites offer free online access for a trial period, so it's always very good to try those websites and see which one suits you. For example, I did use ancestry.co.uk just because I found, because my husband's heritage was a lot European, they had the better records for access for me. Okay. Don't be too disheartened though. It's start where you know, and see where it takes you. It can be a very fascinating journey. It can be a very frustrating journey, because my family on both sides were Irish, and a lot of the records were destroyed, you know, around the turn of the century. So a lot of the things that I would like to find out, I would probably have to go to a church in Ireland, and actually, because I don't know where those are, it is very hard to do that. So yes, enjoy. It is fascinating, it's very interesting, and yes, enjoy.